She stood in the middle of my kitchen, and called me a useless freeloader. I froze. After everything I'd sacrificed, selling my jewelry to pay their mortgage, quietly covering her IVF bills, giving up my own retirement plans just to help raise their twins, this is what I got in return: disdain, humiliation. My name is Eleanor Price, and I live in Santa Barbara, California. For years, I endured her icy glares, her whispered insults, her smug little sighs every time I poured a second cup of coffee. But that day, as I wiped her spit off my cheek, I said it silently to myself: I refuse to be trampled on any longer. She didn't know I owned the deed, but she would soon. I never thought I'd be spit on by someone I once considered family, but there she stood, Amanda, her arms crossed, chin tilted, high eyes, sharp with contempt as she said it. "You're nothing but a freeloader, Eleanor. A parasite." The word struck harder than any slap could have. I had just placed the kettle on the stove when she exploded, apparently furious that I had folded Jacob's work shirts incorrectly. I blinked, stunned, the steam behind me rising as I struggled to process what I had just heard. A freeloader, me. I had paid the $150,000 down payment on this very house. I had refinanced my pension early to help them avoid foreclosure during the pandemic. I had slept on a worn couch for 3 months when Amanda was on bed rest with the twins, so she could have the master bedroom. I had done the laundry, cooked dinner every night, read bedtime stories, cleaned up vomit at 2 a.m., when the babies were teething, all while they traveled, worked late, or just needed space. And now she called me a burden, an embarrassment, a leech. "I'm sorry, Amanda," I said quietly, trying to stay calm. "I didn't mean to. I don't want to hear it," she snapped, cutting me off like I was her maid. "You've lived here rent-free for 2 years. 2 years. How much longer do you plan on clinging to my husband in this house?" My husband, not our family, not even Jacob, my husband. The bitterness in her voice stung. I reached for the teacups with shaking hands, trying to keep myself steady. But then she walked up and spit, right on the floor near my feet. She didn't say another word, just stormed out of the kitchen, her heels clicking across the hardwood like little hammers, nailing shut whatever illusion I'd been holding on to about this being a home. I stood there stunned. I bent down slowly to wipe it up. Something in me cracked. For months, I had endured her icy silence, the way she moved my things around or accidentally donated a scarf my late husband gave me. I tolerated being made to sleep in the utility room when Amanda's cousin visited for 2 weeks. I had told myself this was just what aging looked like in modern families, that I needed to stay humble, grateful. But as I knelt there on that cold floor, wiping away Amanda's contempt, I realized something bone deep I refused to be trampled on any longer. No more swallowing pride for the sake of keeping peace. No more brushing off their condescending tone. No more silently wondering why Jacob, my only son, said nothing, did nothing as his wife pushed me further and further into the shadows of a home I helped build. I stood up slowly, something in my chest shifted. A warmth, not from anger, but from clarity. They didn't know the deed to the house was in my name. Not Amanda, not even Jacob. It had been easier not to tell them. I didn't want them to feel indebted. I didn't want to seem boastful. I just wanted them to feel safe. But now, I was done playing the invisible hand that held everything together. Let them try and stand on their own for once. I went to my room, my tiny, windowless room off the garage that still smelled like motor oil, and opened the cedar box I kept on the shelf. Inside were copies of every major document, the original property deed, the bank transfers, the emails with the realtor, all with my name on them. I traced my fingers over the embossed seal and smiled for the first time in days. They thought they could push me out. What they didn't realize was they were standing on my foundation. Let them keep talking. Let Amanda insult me until her voice goes hoarse. Because soon I would speak not with words, but with actions. And they'd have no choice but to listen. Jacob didn't always make bad decisions. There was a time before Amanda when he was careful, considerate, and deeply devoted to me. He called every Sunday, brought flowers when he visited, even reminded me to take my vitamins when I forgot. I thought I'd raised him right. But everything changed after he met her. Amanda was magnetic, sharp, ambitious, and quick to dismiss anything that didn't serve her vision of success. She wanted a man with drive, and Jacob, sweet, steady Jacob, wanted to be enough for her. So when she insisted they buy a 5-bedroom house in Santa Barbara before they were even married, he said yes. When she demanded a destination wedding in Belize with custom silk napkins, he said yes. When she pushed him to leave his stable government job for a startup with more potential, he said yes. And when the money dried up, it was me they turned to. The first time they asked for help, I didn't hesitate. Jacob came over looking hollow-eyed, his voice shaking as he explained the bank had rejected their mortgage application. "I didn't know where else to go, Mom," he said. "They want a co-signer." I was living modestly in a 2-bedroom condo in Ventura at the time. Nothing fancy, but fully paid off. I had a pension from my years as a school librarian and some modest savings. I could have said no. I should have said no. But instead, I smiled and said, "Of course, sweetheart, I'll help." I liquidated a CD early, lost a good chunk to penalties, and transferred $150,000 to cover their down payment. Amanda didn't say thank you. She said, "Well, it's an investment, right? We'll all benefit." We didn't. When Jacob's startup folded 8 months later and they were behind on payments, I helped again. Sold my late husband's vintage stamp collection, rented out my condo, and moved in with them, thinking it would be temporary. But temporary stretched into permanence, and gratitude curdled into expectation. Soon, I was the unpaid nanny-maid grocery runner and backup cook. Amanda called it a mutually beneficial arrangement. Jacob stopped making eye contact when she scolded me. He started leaving the room when things got tense. At first, I convinced myself he was just caught in the middle, but over time, I realized he'd chosen silence. Chosen her. Still, I stayed. When Amanda struggled with fertility, I drove her to every appointment, even paid out of pocket for supplements her insurance didn't cover. When she was on bed rest with the twins, I practically ran the household washing sheets, managing bills, hand-feeding her bland oatmeal when she couldn't stomach anything else. I remember once when she cried from hormonal pain, I held her hand and said, "You're not alone. I'm here." Her reply, "Just don't let the twins hear you talk too much. Your voice is kind of shrill." That should have been a warning. But I didn't listen. I was still clinging to hope, to the dream that one day Amanda would see me as more than a servant, that Jacob would return to the son I once knew. And yet, with every year that passed, I shrank further into the walls of that house. Amanda redecorated, removed the family portraits I'd hung, donated my books without asking. When I asked where they'd gone, she said, "Old clutter doesn't suit the new vibe." But I let it go, because I thought if I just give a little more love, a little harder, endure a little longer, they'll remember who I am. I thought wrong. One evening during dinner, Amanda made a joke in front of her friends. "Eleanor's practically part of the furniture now." Everyone laughed. Jacob didn't flinch. That night, I cried in the laundry room. But even then, I didn't pack my bags, because I thought I was essential, that they'd crumble without me. And maybe in a way they would have. They never once asked how I managed to keep the bills paid on time, never questioned why the lights stayed on even when Jacob had no work, never saw the quiet way I stretched my Social Security check to cover their gaps. They just assumed the universe would provide. But I was the universe. I was the safety net, the cushion, the ghost who made everything function. And they didn't even see me. Now, as I think back on it, I realize I wasn't helping. I was enabling, and it cost me pieces of myself. But no more, because the moment Amanda spit on the floor and called me a freeloader, she unknowingly severed the last string of guilt tying me to them. Now I'm preparing to show them just how much they depended on the woman they so casually dismissed. And they'll learn belatedly that I wasn't the freeloader. I was the lifeline. The house wasn't even theirs. That's the part that still makes me shake my head. Amanda liked to parade around giving home tours to her friends like she was the queen of some HGTV palace. "This is our gourmet kitchen," she'd say, waving a manicured hand over the marble countertops I helped pay for. Jacob and I picked out these floors ourselves. She'd smile conveniently, forgetting it was me who covered the flooring invoice when they maxed out their credit cards. I even remember her scoffing once, "Thank God we didn't have to get a cheap fixer-upper while standing in a foyer I practically bought." But they never bothered to ask whose name was etched on the deed. Not once. Amanda had assumed wrongly arrogantly that my role was to support, not to own, to give without question but never receive acknowledgement. She thought of me as a silent relic of the past, something to be boxed up, ignored, or eventually discarded. But legally, this house with 5 bedrooms, vaulted ceilings, and a $5 million market value was mine. I remember the day I signed the documents. Jacob had been so desperate. They had a tight deadline to close, and their financing had hit a snag. Amanda was already shopping for furniture she couldn't afford. The realtor warned them they'd lose the house to another buyer within 48 hours if they didn't move quickly. Jacob came to me in tears. Not Amanda, never Amanda. She was too proud to beg. "Mom, please," he said. "We'll pay you back. I promise." I agreed, but on one condition: the deed would be in my name until the mortgage was settled. Not to control them, but to protect the investment. I knew how fragile their situation was. And more than that, I knew I couldn't trust Amanda's version of loyalty. I needed insurance, not money, but leverage. So I signed the purchase contract. The title listed Eleanor Price as the primary owner. I paid the down payment, covered the closing costs, and let them move in while pretending it was all theirs. Because back then I still believed love meant giving without keeping score. For 2 years, I said nothing. I let Amanda decorate it like it was her private canvas, allowed Jacob to boast about their equity at barbecues, and bit my tongue every time she corrected me for touching her coffee machine. But now, I keep the deed in a fireproof folder in my locked suitcase. The original, stamped, signed, enforceable. I took it out again the night Amanda spat on the floor, ran my fingers over the embossed seal, and whispered to myself, "Let them try and throw me out. Let them try." Amanda couldn't throw me out of a house she didn't legally own, and Jacob, well, he never read the fine print, never asked questions. He was too busy nodding to whatever Amanda told him. He still doesn't know. I thought about telling him after the first time she called me the help. I almost did when she made me serve her book club hors d'oeuvres like I was staff, but I didn't, because back then I still wanted his affection more than I wanted my dignity. Now I want both, and I'll have them, or neither, but never just one again. I spent a week going through my files, organizing bank statements, property tax records, and utility bills, every last detail that proved I had been the one holding everything together. I even found the receipt from the time I paid for their home insurance renewal when Jacob forgot. They had no idea the house nearly lapsed into default. Amanda once joked Eleanor just floats around like a ghost. Harmless. A ghost, yes, but not harmless. Because ghosts don't just disappear. Sometimes they come back to haunt. And if Amanda thought she could insult me into silence, she was about to learn what happens when a woman who's sacrificed everything finally decides to stop hiding her power. I called my lawyer, Lisa Sharp, discreet and well-versed in elder rights. She confirmed everything. The deed was in my name. I had full authority to sell the property if I chose. As long as I wasn't mentally impaired and gave 30 days' notice, I could legally evict them both. And I wasn't just mentally sound, I was enraged. Calmly enraged. Lisa offered to begin drafting paperwork. I told her to wait. "Not yet," I said. "Let her humiliate herself one more time. Let her feel like she's winning." Because the bigger the fall, the louder the silence when it hits. For now, I smile at Amanda when she snaps at me. I tidy the kitchen with quiet hands. I fold Jacob's shirts a little too perfectly. And at night, I open that deed and look at my name, Eleanor Price, printed in bold across the top. They may not know whose house they live in, but they're about to. I used to believe that sacrifice was the purest form of love, that if I just gave enough of my time, my money, my health, my family would one day understand, that they'd look at me and see more than someone who made herself small so they could grow tall. But what I've come to learn is this. When you make yourself a doormat, don't be surprised when people wipe their feet on you without saying thank you. I wasn't always this quiet. I wasn't always this invisible. I was once a woman who dreamed of teaching college literature. I was accepted into a master's program in San Diego, but I turned it down when my husband fell sick. I cared for him for 7 years, changing dressings, managing medications, feeding him with trembling hands when the cancer made him too weak to lift a spoon. I gave up the degree, the dream, the friendships. I told myself that family came first. When he died, I thought that sacrifice would be honored, that my son would remember who stood beside his father in every emergency room, that Amanda would see me as a strong, loyal woman who knew how to carry burdens. Instead, they saw a widow with too much time on her hands. After the funeral, Amanda didn't say, "I'm sorry for your loss." She said, "So, what are your plans now?" Like I was a problem to be solved. Like my husband's death wasn't just a heartbreak, it was an inconvenience to her routine. I was too broken then to answer properly, so I packed my bags and moved out of my small Ventura condo telling myself this was temporary, that I would help them until they got back on their feet. But temporary turned into years. They let me unpack in a storage room with no ventilation, said it was only until the guest room is free, but that guest room has never once been offered. Even when Amanda's cousin left and it sat empty for 6 weeks, Amanda filled it with boxes. Storage, she claimed. What they really wanted was to keep me where they wouldn't have to look at me. I cooked every meal, drove the twins to school, sat in the emergency room when Amanda had a gallbladder scare holding her hand, while Jacob paced nervously. I was there for birthdays, holidays, the flu lice outbreaks, and heartbreaks. I ran this house behind the scenes while they smiled for Instagram. There were times when I ran out of my own medications because I spent the last of my check on groceries. Times I pawned heirloom jewelry to keep the electricity on without saying a word. I didn't want to burden them. Amanda once said, "You're lucky we let you stay here." The nerve, the gall in Jacob. He just looked down at his plate, said nothing. That was the moment I realized this wasn't love. This was exploitation dressed in polite smiles. And yet, God help me, I still tried. When Jacob forgot their anniversary, I baked a cake, bought flowers, and helped the kids make cards pretending it was all from him. When Amanda lost her temper and stormed out during a family dinner, I cleaned up the mess, comforted the children, and told Jacob she's just overwhelmed. But in all those moments, I slowly disappeared. I stopped buying new clothes. I stopped seeing my friends. I stopped existing outside their needs, until all that remained was a shell of a woman who served, nodded, and apologized for taking up space in a house she owned. I remember one particular night. Amanda was out with friends. Jacob had fallen asleep on the couch. I was in the kitchen washing dishes after another thankless dinner when my granddaughter came up to me and whispered, "Grandma, do you live here or do you work here?" I froze. That tiny question held more truth than any adult in that house had ever dared speak. And the truth I didn't know anymore. Because somewhere between Amanda's cutting remarks and Jacob's cowardly silence, I lost myself. But no more. These past few days, as I've pulled out the paperwork, reviewed every receipt and legal document, I've begun to see the full picture. Not just of what they took, but of what I gave. I gave them a mother, a caretaker, a financial guardian, a silent soldier who fought their battles without ever asking for recognition. And in return, they gave me scraps, a cold storage room, a condescending glare, a label freeloader that cut deeper than any blade ever could. But I've taken their measure now. I know the truth. They may call me old, but I'm not done. I may have sacrificed my dreams, but I haven't sacrificed my self-respect. I've begun to reclaim what they've taken from me piece by piece, memory by memory, deed by deed. And it starts with the house. The house they think is theirs. The house I gave everything to keep afloat. The house that bears my name, not theirs. They don't know it yet, but they will. Because I gave everything for this family, and now for once I will take something back. People always say that true character shows under pressure. I disagree. I think true character shows when someone believes no one is watching. And Amanda always thought I wasn't watching. At first, I mistook her behavior for stress. New marriage, new house financial strain. 2 colicky infants, surely she was just overwhelmed. That's what I told myself the first time she rolled her eyes when I offered to help fold laundry. "Don't worry, Eleanor," she said with a tight-lipped smile. "I'll fix it when you're done." The second time she accidentally threw away my arthritis medication, I chalked it up to a mix-up. But as time passed, the signs became impossible to ignore. She wasn't overwhelmed. She was cruel. It started small, cutting me out of conversations, turning the TV to shows she knew I couldn't stand, conveniently forgetting to include me in dinner plans. Then came the whispers to Jacob behind closed doors. I'd walk into the hallway and the laughter would stop. The tone would shift. Doors would close faster. One night, I overheard her on the phone with a friend in the backyard. She thought I was asleep. "She just lingers, she said, as if I were a bad smell, like she has nowhere else to go. It's pathetic." That word rang in my ears, pathetic. I had carried Amanda through her darkest days, comforted her after her miscarriage, prayed for her when she couldn't sleep at night. I held her hand while she wept about feeling like a failure. And now I was pathetic. I stood in the dark kitchen holding the kettle with trembling hands. I didn't cry, I didn't gasp, I just stood still. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just resentment. This was contempt. And Jacob, my Jacob, had become a coward in his own home. I tried confronting him once in the quiet of early morning while Amanda was out getting a blowout at her favorite salon. I sat him down with a mug of coffee and said, "I don't feel welcome here, Jacob. I'm trying, but it's hard when Amanda—" I trailed off, waiting for him to fill in the blanks. He didn't. Instead, he sighed and said, "Mom, she just has a strong personality. You know how she is." A strong personality. As if belittling me in front of my grandchildren was a quirk. As if slamming my door at night and mocking my old lady slippers was a personality trait. "She's under a lot of stress," he added. "She just needs space." Space. I was sleeping next to the washing machine. How much more space did she need? I realized then that he wouldn't defend me, not really. Not in the way I deserved. Because standing up for me would cost him his peace with Amanda. And peace with Amanda was the currency he couldn't afford to lose. So I stopped asking. But I started watching. I noticed how she smiled when Jacob handed me cheap drugstore flowers on my birthday. How she made sure to post a photo of our perfect little family every holiday, never once tagging me, never once including me in the group shots. And slowly the mask slipped further. She began correcting the children when they called me Grandma. "Call her Eleanor, it's more respectful." Respectful. She barked orders like a drill sergeant and treated me like an unpaid staff member. She once called me into the kitchen while her friends were over to ask where the wine opener was, then laughed when I fumbled and dropped it. "Oops," she said. "Poor Eleanor's getting clumsy in her old age." The room erupted in laughter. I laughed too. That fake dry chuckle women use when they're swallowing heartbreak. I told myself I could endure it. But then she crossed a line I couldn't excuse. It was a Sunday morning. The twins were sick. I stayed up all night with them, wiping their foreheads, changing sheets and giving them fluids, while Amanda slept soundly behind her closed bedroom door. The next afternoon, I made soup from scratch the way my mother taught me. I carried it to their bedroom in a tray with crackers and their favorite fruit slices, arranged into smiley faces. Amanda intercepted me in the hallway. "I'll take it," she said, grabbing the tray. "We don't need you hovering." I hesitated. I just wanted to check on them. She stepped forward, dropped her voice to a whisper, and said, "You are not their mother, Eleanor. Stop pretending like you matter here." That broke something in me. Not because it hurt, though it did, but because in that moment I saw her for what she truly was, a woman who needed to step on others to feel tall. A woman who felt threatened by kindness, by memory, by any love not centered on her. That night I opened my cedar box, the one with the house deed. I stared at my name, ran my fingers over the raised lettering like a rosary. Eleanor Price. Not pathetic, not invisible, not just the help, and certainly not disposable. I made a promise to myself I would not let this woman destroy what I had spent a lifetime building. I would not let her rewrite my role in this family. I would not allow her to erase me from a home that only existed because of me. Amanda's true colors had shown, and I was done pretending I didn't see them. There's always one moment, one breath, One sharp, irreversible second where something shifts and the part of you that used to endure finally says, no more. For me, it happened in the middle of a Monday afternoon. Amanda had asked commanded me to do the twins' laundry again. The housekeeper they occasionally hired hadn't shown up that week, and apparently that meant I had to fill the role. I didn't complain. I'd already done the dishes, prepped the kids' lunches for tomorrow, and spent the morning vacuuming the stairs. I figured folding a few shirts wouldn't kill me. But then while I was quietly sorting socks in the laundry room, I heard voices through the slightly cracked door. Laughter. The kind of careless, sharp laughter that carries venom beneath the surface. She still folds the towels like they're relics in a museum, Amanda scoffed. Your mother-in-law, a woman replied. I recognized the voice, her Pilates instructor, one of the wine club women. She folds everything like she's trying to impress the Queen of England, Amanda mocked. It's like, lady, this isn't 1950. You're not in a commercial. Laughter. I froze a baby sock in one hand, a lump in my throat. She really thinks this is her home, Amanda added, her voice laced with disgust. But she's basically a live-in maid. I don't even know why Jacob hasn't just told her to leave. That's when I heard the other woman ask, wait, doesn't she own that condo somewhere? Amanda's voice dipped low sharper now. Yeah, but it's trash. She sold her jewelry and rented it out or something. She has nothing now. That's why she clings to us. She knows she has nowhere to go. The silence in the laundry room felt like a vacuum had sucked out the air. I could hear the washing machine spinning, the whirring echo of suds, swirling in circles just like my thoughts. She thinks I have nothing. Amanda had no idea. She didn't know about the inheritance bonds tucked away in my safe deposit box or the condo I never sold, just temporarily leased. She didn't know that I'd once invested quietly in a friend's coastal vineyard, and that last year it had sold to a distributor for 7 figures. She didn't know about the house deed or the lawyer on retainer, or the fact that while she flaunted designer bags bought on credit, I sat on assets she couldn't dream of. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Because the sting wasn't in what she said. It was in how she said it. Like I was dirt, like I was disposable, like my love, my years, my body bent and tired from serving her family meant nothing. I stood there trembling, sock still clutched in my hand, and I whispered aloud, I am not your maid. I am not your joke. I didn't even hear the tears fall, but I felt them warm and fast, splashing against the back of my hand. And that was it. That was the moment I reached my breaking point. No more folding, no more apologizing, no more being a ghost in a house I funded. I walked straight to my room, the one tucked behind the garage, with the cracked plaster and the moldy corners. Amanda claimed she couldn't afford to renovate. I sat down on the edge of the bed, hands still damp with tears, and opened the drawer beneath my nightstand. Inside was a worn notebook, leather-bound pages, yellowed with time. I opened to the back where I had once out of habit scribbled down every major contribution I made to this house. I had kept the records not out of bitterness, but because I needed to believe that it all added up to something. Now that ledger was my ammunition. I grabbed a pen and started updating. Paid the mortgage on August 10th when Jacob's payment bounced. Covered the twins' school enrollment deposit. Paid the plumber when the kitchen sink burst. Bought new tires for Amanda's SUV when she said she forgot her wallet. I wrote every dollar, every favor, every humiliation. By the time I was done, I stared down at 10 pages of proof. Proof that I had given and given and given while they laughed at me behind closed doors. And I knew then and there I had a choice. I could cling to the scraps of affection Jacob occasionally offered, wait for Amanda's next slight, and let it chip away whatever was left of my dignity. Or I could take back control. I could show them what a freeloader looks like when she stops playing dumb. I reached for my phone and dialed Lisa, my attorney. It's time, I said. Time for what she asked gently. For them to remember whose house they're standing in. The next morning I dressed with more care than usual. I pulled out the navy blue sweater I used to wear for school board meetings, the one Amanda once called dated. I paired it with my slacks, polished my shoes, and even put on the pearl earrings Jacob gave me when he graduated college, back when I still meant the world to him. Then I packed my small, worn leather folder, the one Amanda never noticed, even though I kept it in plain sight on my bookshelf. Inside was a collection of neatly labeled documents, the house deed, utility bills, in my name property tax receipts, bank transfer confirmations, my paper trail of sacrifice and quiet power. I held the folder close like armor. Then I drove into town and parked in front of Lisa Redding's office. Lisa had been my lawyer for 6 years, young, sharp, discreet. I had hired her long ago to help with my late husband's estate and kept her on retainer just in case the world tried to take more than it already had. She greeted me warmly, ushered me into her private office with its tall windows and bookshelves lined with legal volumes. "I'm ready," I said before she could even ask. My voice was calm, steady. The voice of a woman who has been crushed, molded, and finally reborn by fire. Lisa sat across from me and raised an eyebrow. "Tell me everything." And I did. I told her about Amanda's cruelty, Jacob's silence, the spit on my kitchen floor, the whispering in the hallway, the mockery, the laughter, the moment in the laundry room that snapped whatever invisible thread I'd been clinging to for years. She listened without interrupting, taking notes on her yellow legal pad, nodding when I grew quiet. When I finished, I opened the folder and slid the house deed across the desk. "I want to sell," I said. Lisa blinked. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "They think I have nothing. They think I need them. But I don't. And I'm done pretending." She glanced at the deed, scanned the details, then smiled not with amusement but with admiration. "Well," she said, clicking her pen, "you're the sole owner, free and clear. No liens, no encumbrances. If you want to sell, no one can stop you. Legally, you could give them 30 days' notice and have them removed." A small thrill ran through me. Not from vengeance, but from certainty, from power. "I want to start the process immediately," I said, "but I don't want them to know yet." Lisa nodded, already drafting a plan. "We can prepare a quiet listing. No signage, no open houses until you're ready. We'll work with a discreet agent. You just say the word." I left her office that afternoon with a new contract in my purse, and my head held higher than it had been in years. The sun was warm on my shoulders as I walked to the car, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like someone's burden. I felt like a woman with options. When I got home, Amanda was sitting on the porch with her sunglasses perched on her head and her tablet in hand. She didn't look up as I passed. "Hope you didn't spend too much on groceries," she muttered. I didn't reply. I went to my room, closed the door, and pulled out the folder again. I laid everything out on the bed. The deed, the lawyer's contract, the power of attorney documents, the valuation statement from the bank showing the house was worth nearly $5 million. All in my name. I snapped a photo of the folder and emailed it to myself, then printed a backup copy and hid it in my safe box. I wasn't about to let my one weapon fall into careless hands. That night, as Amanda and Jacob argued in the next room about which countertop material was more modern, I sat in my little garage room and stared at the folder. This thin stack of paper, so easy to overlook, was my shield, my voice, my proof. They thought I was meek, thought I would fade away quietly like some tired old ghost. But ghosts don't leave. They linger. And I was done whispering. It wouldn't be long now. Just a few more steps and they'd learn exactly who they'd been underestimating. I used to avoid mirrors. It wasn't vanity. It was something deeper, quieter, like shame wrapped in fatigue. I didn't want to see the woman I'd become slouched, overlooked, erased. In my mind, I still saw myself as I once was, strong, capable, valued. But each glance in the mirror over the past few years chipped away at that image. Until now. That morning, I stood in front of the mirror with the sunlight streaming through the tiny window in my makeshift room. For the first time in years, I looked myself in the eye, and I saw someone worth fighting for. I saw a woman who raised a son on her own after losing a husband to cancer, a woman who sacrificed her dreams, gave freely, loved deeply, and who in return was reduced to a servant in a house she owned. No more. I ran a comb through my silver-streaked hair, applied a soft layer of lipstick, just enough to remind myself I was still here, and slipped into my navy sweater again. My armor. Today I had 2 goals. First, finalize the listing agreement. Second, begin reclaiming the pieces of myself Amanda had stolen with every smug comment and dismissive glance. I called the real estate agent Lisa had recommended Diane, a seasoned professional known for handling discreet high-end properties. She arrived that afternoon dressed in tailored gray slacks heels that clicked across the tile and a warm, measured smile. "Nice to meet you, Eleanor," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "Lisa told me you're looking for quiet, efficient, and serious." "That's exactly right," I replied. We sat in the sunroom. Amanda was out with the kids, Jacob at work, and went over the numbers. Market value just shy of $5 million. Diane had already run a silent pre-appraisal. The buyers were out there. Privacy wouldn't be an issue. And with the location, the finishes, the school district, it would move fast. "Once you're ready, I can start scheduling private viewings," she said. "No signs, no gossip, just serious offers." We signed the agreement. I tucked my copy into the folder. It was happening. After Diane left, I sat on the back patio with a cup of tea. I watched the wind rustle the lemon tree Jacob and Amanda had planted during their Pinterest gardening phase. I remembered how I dug half those holes myself while they bickered over mulch colors. I smiled. They thought I was fragile. They thought I had no spine. What they didn't realize is that quiet doesn't mean weak, and sacrifice isn't the same as surrender. That evening, Amanda returned, tossing her designer bag on the counter, like a queen returning from war. She barely looked at me. "Did you pick up the dry cleaning?" she asked. "No," I said softly. She paused, looked up. "What?" "I didn't pick it up," I repeated. "I had other things to do." Her lips parted, stunned for a split second, but she recovered quickly, letting out a scoff. "Well, can you go tomorrow? Then Jacob needs his suit for the fundraiser." I tilted my head. "Amanda, I think you'll need to start handling those things yourselves." She blinked. The room was silent for one long, delicious moment. Then she laughed, sharp and derisive. "Are you seriously getting lazy now?" "No," I said, standing up slowly. "I'm just done being invisible." I walked away before she could respond. That night, I treated myself to something I hadn't done in years, a bath. I lit a candle, played soft music, closed my eyes, and imagined the sound of her begging. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about dignity, about teaching people that just because someone stays quiet doesn't mean they aren't paying attention, that just because someone gives doesn't mean they don't have the power to take back what's theirs. The next day, Diane messaged me. 2 private buyers were interested. We scheduled viewings. I started moving my belongings slowly, methodically to a storage unit I had quietly rented with cash. Amanda didn't notice. She was too busy planning her next girls' trip to Cabo. They still believed I was a shadow hovering behind them. But I was a storm, and I was gathering. Let them enjoy the calm, because soon they'd learn what I was really worth. And it would cost them everything. It was a Saturday morning when everything began to shift quietly, intentionally, and completely out of Amanda's line of sight. She had taken the twins to a birthday party. Jacob was out running errands. The house was empty. It was the perfect moment. Diane arrived right on time. No sign, no balloons, no noisy neighbors peeking over fences. Just 2 sleek black sedans pulling into the driveway, tinted windows shielding the eyes of the serious buyers inside. I greeted them at the door with a warmth Amanda would never have imagined I could muster. "Please come in," I said, opening my front door with a smile. They toured the home, slowly appreciating the hardwood floors, the renovated bathrooms, the backyard Amanda always bragged about. One couple walked through with a notepad, jotting things down quietly. Another buyer, a widow from Palo Alto, lingered in the sunroom and asked if the lemon tree would be included. "It's been well cared for," I told her, "like the rest of the house." They nodded, complimented the space, and asked about timing. I told them it would be fast, that the seller me was ready. By noon, 3 offers were on the table, all above asking. I sat with Diane at the kitchen island, Amanda's pristine white quartz countertop, the one she once claimed only real homeowners choose, and reviewed the bids. Diane tapped one offer in particular. "They're cash buyers," she said, "and they want to close in 2 weeks." I didn't hesitate. "Let's do it." She smiled. "I'll draft everything. You'll just need to sign." I watched her drive off with the papers. The whole house was still and silent, like it was holding its breath. Amanda had no idea that while she gossiped over mimosas with other mothers, strangers had walked through the home she thought she ruled, that they had marveled at the space she claimed as her own, that one of them would soon be replacing her, and it was all happening without her permission. Later that afternoon, Amanda burst through the door, dropping her keys and calling for Jacob. I was sitting in the living room with a book open, calm as a lake. "What's this?" she asked, suddenly pulling a real estate flyer from the recycling bin. Her voice was high, sharp. "Did someone drop this off?" I looked at the flyer. It must have been left accidentally by one of the buyers. "Oh," I said lightly, "must have slipped in." She narrowed her eyes. There was a car parked outside earlier, a black Mercedes. "Do you know who?" "No idea," I said. Her face twitched. I watched her study me, trying to decide if I was lying. But Amanda never really saw me as someone capable of lying or of doing anything outside her permission. So she dropped it. And I smiled. That evening, I walked the halls, slowly memorizing every detail: the scuff on the baseboard where Jacob used to ride his scooter indoors, the faded patch on the carpet where the twins spilled grape juice, the tiny chip on the bathroom sink from Amanda's dropped perfume bottle. It was my home, but not for much longer. The next day, Diane returned with the finalized contract. I signed. And just like that, the house was sold. I tucked the signed documents back into my little leather folder and placed it gently in my suitcase right next to my spare keys and the printed list of temporary condos I'd been quietly viewing for myself. No drama, no announcement, no shouting match. Just quiet, controlled freedom. They still hadn't noticed that half my clothes were gone, that boxes had disappeared from the garage, that the good dishes were already packed. Amanda's world was about to collapse, and she wouldn't see it coming until the ink had dried and the new owners rang the bell. And when they did, she would learn that the woman she called a freeloader had just evicted her without raising her voice. I poured myself a glass of tea, sat in the sunroom, and listened to the birds outside. This house had seen me suffer, bend, and ache, but now it would see me win. Let Amanda enjoy these last few days of playing queen, because soon she'd be a guest in someone else's home, bag in hand, rage in her chest. And I'd be free. It happened on a Wednesday. Cloudless sky, soft breeze, the kind of day Amanda usually called perfect for a pool selfie. But I wasn't thinking about pools or Instagram. I was thinking about liberation. Diane arrived right after breakfast, punctual as ever. She carried a folder with a silver clasp and a knowing smile that said everything was in order. "This is it," she said, laying the contract on the kitchen island. "Cash buyer, full amount. 2-week closing. They've waived inspection." I stared down at the paperwork. My name, Eleanor Price, printed boldly at the top, just like it had been on the original deed. That name had been ignored, dismissed, insulted for years inside these very walls. And now it was the only name that mattered. I picked up the pen, signed, initialed, dated. When I lifted my hand from the final page, I felt it, the weight of 20 years, roll off my shoulders like an old, heavy shawl. Gone. Just like that. "I'll begin the closing process," Diane said, "and I'll have the escrow account wired to your new bank by Friday." I smiled, my voice steady. Perfect. We hugged. Not because we were friends, but because something profound had just happened. Diane didn't just help me sell a house, she helped me reclaim my power. After she left, I made tea and sat quietly in the backyard. I watched the wind rustle the lemon tree leaves and thought of all the nights I stood on this patio, silent and aching, pretending I didn't hear Amanda mocking me through the open window. Now that same window would soon belong to someone else. Amanda and Jacob had no idea. Not yet. Jacob had texted earlier to say he'd be home late. Amanda was upstairs watching reality TV, oblivious as always. I could hear her laughter echoing down the staircase, sharp, hollow like a bell in an empty church. I took the signed contract and placed it gently into my leather folder, then zipped the folder shut and slid it into my suitcase. The same suitcase I'd quietly packed over the past 3 weeks. My closet was nearly empty now. Amanda hadn't noticed. She thought I was reorganizing. She had no idea the floral china set she adored had already been removed, or that the antique desk her friends always complimented was gone, not sold, just moved to my new condo. A place she would never see. That evening, as Amanda pranced around in yoga pants, bragging about how she'd finally convinced Jacob to fund her wellness retreat, I stood in the kitchen and nodded politely. "Enjoy yourself," I said. "Oh, I will," she smirked. "When you have kids and a full life, you need luxury escapes." I didn't respond. I simply turned back to my tea, hiding the smile that tugged at the corners of my mouth. Because I already knew what she didn't. In 2 weeks, she'd be out on the curb with her designer bags and her crushed pride begging me for a second chance. But there would be no second chance. I was done begging for room in a house I owned. I was done pleading for respect from a woman who couldn't recognize it if it stood in front of her holding a deed. The deal was signed. It was official. And every second that passed brought her closer to the moment she'd realized she never held the power in this house. I did. They say revenge is loud screaming matches, shattered plates, door-slamming fury, but I've learned that real power whispers, and mine. It arrived in the form of a calm, legally binding letter taped to the refrigerator door. I placed it there on a Thursday afternoon. Amanda had gone out for her Pilates class. Jacob was still at work. The twins were upstairs, napping peacefully. The house was still and silent, and for the first time I could feel its walls breathing differently, less like a prison, more like a vessel being emptied for something new. The letter was crisp, typed, direct. Notice of termination of occupancy. 30 days to vacate. Effective immediately. Signed, Eleanor Price, legal owner. I didn't wait in the kitchen. I went to my room, sat quietly, and waited. It wasn't long. Amanda's voice echoed down the hallway like a car crash. "What is this?" She stormed in heels, slapping the tile. The letter was clenched in her fist, crumpled now and shaking with rage. "You think this is funny?" she shouted, waving the paper in my face. "You think you can just kick us out?" I looked up at her and said calmly, "I'm not kicking you out. I'm exercising my legal rights." Her mouth opened, closed. She didn't know what to say. She hadn't expected that tone from me, the old ghost who fetched her dry cleaning and folded her underwear. I'll call Jacob," she snapped. "Please do," I replied. She turned and stormed off, muttering profanities under her breath. I stayed seated, hands folded in my lap, steady as stone. When Jacob arrived 20 minutes later, Amanda was pacing the living room like a caged animal. "She's out of her mind," she barked the moment he opened the door. "Your mother thinks she can sell the house just like that." Jacob looked at me. For once, truly looked at me. "Mom, what's going on?" I stood up, slowly walked to the drawer and pulled out the folder. I laid it on the table, opened to the deed, and slid it across. His eyes scanned the document, then scanned again. He went pale. This is in your name," he whispered. "Yes," I said. "It always has been." Silence. Amanda's jaw dropped. "That's not possible. We bought this house together. We've been paying the mortgage for years. This is ours." I turned to her calm and direct. "Actually, I've been paying the mortgage, quietly, for years. Every time Jacob missed a payment, every time your account ran short. I made sure you kept your lights on Amanda. I kept your family from collapsing while you mocked me behind closed doors." Her eyes widened. "You were spying on us." "No," I said. "I was saving you, and you never even said thank you." Jacob slumped into a chair, rubbing his forehead. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I loved you," I said, "and I didn't want you to feel ashamed. I wanted to help. I thought one day maybe you'd see me." Amanda's face was red now, her voice shrill. "You can't do this. Where are we supposed to go?" "That's not my problem anymore." She gasped like I had struck her, and maybe in a way I had. Not with violence, but with truth. The truth she had ignored, underestimated, and laughed at for years. "I gave you a month," I said. "That's generous. The buyers close in 2 weeks. They'll take ownership at the end of the month. You need to be out by then." "And if we're not," she hissed, "then the sheriff will help you leave." Jacob looked up, eyes pleading. "Mom, please, think about the kids." I held his gaze. "I am thinking about them. That's why I stayed this long. But letting them see their father allow this kind of disrespect, it's not something I'm willing to support anymore." Amanda was pacing now, frantic. "We can't find a place in 30 days. You can't do this. We're family." "No," I said, stepping forward. "You stopped being family the day you spit at my feet and called me a freeloader. The day you erased me from birthday photos. The day you made me feel like a ghost in the home I gave you." She opened her mouth again, but the words never came. Jacob stood slowly. He looked at me, then at Amanda, then back at me. "I didn't know," he said. "I know you didn't," I said gently, "and that's the problem." I walked past them through the hallway out the door into the sunlit yard where the lemon tree rustled softly. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to slam anything. The confrontation had happened, and I had won. Not because I humiliated them, but because for the first time I had chosen myself. Later that evening, after Amanda had finally retreated upstairs in furious silence, Jacob knocked softly on my door. I was sitting at my desk sipping chamomile tea and rereading the buyer's offer just to reassure myself it was real, this freedom, this justice. The knock was quiet, hesitant. I didn't answer immediately. I let him wait. Then calmly I said, "Come in." He stepped inside slowly, his shoulders hunched forward, like a boy who'd been sent to the principal's office, not like the man who once held my hand through hospital corridors, who used to write me Mother's Day cards signed, "Your favorite son." He looked exhausted. "Mom," he started, I'm sorry." I didn't say anything. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the carpet. "I didn't know the house was in your name. I just assumed... Amanda always handled that stuff with the realtor," and I held up my hand. "Jacob," I said gently, "you didn't assume. You just never asked." He flinched. That was the truth he didn't want to hear, not from me, not from anyone. But it was the truth that had sat between us for years like a wall, built out of good intentions and bad decisions. "I should have paid more attention," he mumbled. "No," I replied. "You should have stood up for me." That made him look up. His eyes were red-rimmed now, and for a moment I saw the boy I used to know, the one who cried when he thought he lost his first toy car, who used to fall asleep on my chest during storms. "I thought I was protecting my marriage," he said quietly. "I didn't want to make things worse between Amanda and me." I nodded. "And so you made them worse between you and me." He swallowed hard, his voice low. "She said you were being dramatic, that you were exaggerating everything. And I believed her." I smiled bitterly. "Of course you did. Because believing her meant you didn't have to confront the fact that your wife was bullying your mother under your own roof." He looked down at his hands. I didn't want to see it. "And now I asked." He paused. "Now I can't unsee it." Silence stretched between us. I waited. I wanted to hear what he'd say next, not as a mother desperate to salvage something, but as a woman deciding whether he deserved a place in the next chapter of her life. He looked up again, eyes glassy. "I know you're angry. I don't blame you. I should have spoken up more. I should have—" "No, Jacob," I interrupted. "You shouldn't have spoken. You should have acted." He blinked. "You watched her reduce me," I continued. "Turn me into a background character in my own life. You let her humiliate me, ignore me, treat me like I was disposable. And you said nothing. I thought I was keeping the peace." I shook my head. Peace built on silence is just a prettier name for cowardice. He didn't argue. "I never wanted to be a burden," I added. "All I wanted was respect. A place. To feel like the years I gave didn't disappear the moment I couldn't offer more money or babysitting hours." "You've never been a burden," he said quickly, as if trying to claw something back. "No," I said softly but firmly. "But you let her call me one, over and over." He leaned forward, his head in his hands. "I'm sorry, Mom." It hung in the air. "I didn't say I forgive you." "Not yet. Some wounds take time to close. Some apologies need more than tears, they need change." I stood and walked to my bookshelf, pulled down a photo of us from his college graduation, me, beaming him in his cap and gown arms, wrapped around me like I was his world. "Do you remember who you used to be?" I asked him, placing the photo beside him. He nodded slowly. "That boy loved his mother. That boy respected her." "I still do," he whispered. I gave a soft sigh. "Then show me." He looked up. "How?" "Start by helping your wife pack." It was the first time he didn't flinch at that sentence. No protest, no pleading, just a quiet nod. "I'll help you with whatever you need," he said. "You already have," I replied. And in truth he had, just not in the way he thought. He'd shown me the cost of my silence, the danger of mistaking family loyalty for blind tolerance, the heartbreak of seeing your own child choose comfort over courage. But now Now he had a chance to redeem himself, not with grand gestures, but with honesty, with accountability, with action. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. "You can go now," I said gently. "I need rest." He nodded and stood. At the doorway, he turned and looked at me one last time. "I love you, Mom." This time, I didn't question whether he meant it. But love, as I had learned, wasn't just a word. It was a choice, and he still had time to choose. The house was unusually quiet the morning I left. No sounds of Amanda's voice barking orders, no clatter of the twins' cereal bowls, no passive-aggressive sighs drifting from the hallway. Just stillness. A stillness that no longer felt like suffocation, but like freedom. I stood in the living room one last time, my suitcase by the door, the scent of lemon furniture polish, still lingering in the air. The same lemon scent Amanda used obsessively, as if masking dirt could hide disdain. Everything was packed. The boxes I'd moved discreetly were now loaded into the moving van parked outside its engine, idling low and patient like a trusted companion, waiting to take me home. My new condo by the ocean was ready. Small, modern, with wide windows that overlooked a bluff. The kitchen cabinets were white and bare, waiting to be filled with whatever I chose, not Amanda's sleek appliances or Jacob's clutter, but my things. My life. I wasn't sad. I thought I might be standing here after all the years I spent mothering, sacrificing folding myself in half to fit the mold Amanda forced me into. But I didn't feel grief. I felt peace. Amanda came down the stairs just as I zipped the last bag. She looked terrible. Puffy eyes, makeup half smudged. She had cried clearly, maybe all night. But I had no sympathy left to give. "Please," she said, her voice raw, "don't do this." I tilted my head slightly. "Do what?" "Don't sell the house," she whispered. "We don't have anywhere else to go. Not in this market, not with the twins. This place is all we have." I studied her. For a moment, I tried to remember the Amanda I once met, bright, ambitious, full of potential. But all I could see now was someone who had mistaken kindness for weakness, who had poked and poked until the hand that fed her became a fist holding a deed. "This house was never yours," I said calmly. "You just lived here." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Eleanor, I know I've been awful, but we were just stressed. You have to understand." "No," I said. I did understand. For years. I understood when you ignored me, when you mocked me, when you told my grandchildren to call me by my first name like I was a stranger in their lives. I understood it all, and I let it happen. She stepped forward as if trying to cross some emotional threshold. "We can fix it," she pleaded. "I'll be better, I promise." I gave her the faintest smile, not cruel, not triumphant, just final. "I'm not here to fix anything anymore," I said. "I'm here to leave." The screen door creaked open behind her. Jacob had come in quietly. He stood there in jeans and a faded shirt hands, stuffed into his pockets like a boy caught sneaking out. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me. Then he walked over, picked up my suitcase, and carried it to the front porch. Amanda turned to him, disbelief etched into her face. "You're letting her go." "She doesn't need my permission," Jacob said simply, "and I'm not going to stop her from doing what I should have helped her do a long time ago." She looked between us, her mouth moving, searching for words, but no sound came. I walked past her, slow and steady, each step lighter than the last. At the door, I turned to Jacob. "You'll get the closing date in the mail," I said. "You have until then to be out." He nodded. "I'll handle it." Amanda started to sob ugly, broken sobs that seemed to shake her entire body. I looked at her for the last time. "You had every chance," I said. "All you ever had to do was treat me like a human being." And then I stepped outside. The wind greeted me like an old friend, warm and gentle. The van driver opened the door. "Miss Price." I smiled. "Let's go." As we drove away, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because I wasn't just leaving a house. I was leaving behind every version of myself that thought staying silent was safer than being seen. I didn't realize how loud my old life had been until I stepped into the silence of my new one. My condo wasn't large, but it was mine. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, and a view of the Pacific Ocean that took my breath away every morning. The walls were bare, but I saw that as promise, not emptiness. I would fill them slowly, carefully with things that reflected me, not someone else's version of usefulness. For the first time in decades, no one told me where to sit, what to do, or how long to stay. There were no footsteps pounding upstairs, no insults cloaked in sarcasm, only the gentle hush of the waves outside and the soft whistle of the kettle when it boiled. I began building my rhythm. Morning walks along the shore, coffee in hand, hair loose in the breeze. Sometimes I wore lipstick just because I wanted to. No one was around to ask who I was trying to impress. I began journaling again, something I'd abandoned years ago when Amanda started calling it a sad little hobby. My journal became a sanctuary. Page by page, I wrote down everything I had never said aloud. I deserved better. I waited too long to speak. They never saw my value, but I finally do. I started therapy too. Quiet sessions every Thursday morning with a woman named Ruth, who never rushed me. With her, I unpacked not just what Amanda and Jacob had done, but what I had allowed. We talked about boundaries, about generational guilt, about how women like me are taught to disappear so our children can thrive. You don't have to sacrifice yourself to be loved, Ruth told me once. I believed her, and I started loving myself in a way I never had before. I cooked meals I actually enjoyed, not the bland, low-carb things Amanda dictated. I played classical music through the speakers, danced in the kitchen in my socks. I painted badly. But it made me laugh. One evening, I lit candles, sat by the balcony window, and opened the file folder one last time. The deed was there, the signed contract, the closing check receipt, over $4.8 million neatly deposited into a bank account under my name alone. I took a deep breath, and then I closed the folder and slid it into a drawer, because that chapter was over. The revenge had been quiet, swift, legal, clean. I didn't need to watch Amanda fall apart to feel satisfied. I didn't need to scroll social media for hints of their struggle or misfortune. I didn't want to live in bitterness. I wanted peace. That, to me, was the real power, choosing to move on instead of staying bitter. But even in peace, there was strength, the kind Amanda never understood. One day, I got a voicemail. Jacob. His voice was quiet, careful. "Hey, Mom. Just wanted to say we moved out yesterday. Amanda's staying with her sister for now. The kids keep asking about you. I told them you were on an adventure. I hope that's okay. I hope you're happy. You deserve that. I miss you." I didn't call back, not because I was angry, but because I was finally learning that not every call deserves an answer. Instead, I wrote him a letter. Simple, direct. "Dear Jacob, I'm glad you're out. I hope this is a chance for you to find clarity, not just about me, but about the kind of husband and father you want to be. I'm not angry anymore, but I am done sacrificing myself to keep the peace. I love you, but I also love me now. Mom." I mailed it without a return address, because this was a new life, a new chapter. No more knocking on closed doors, no more begging to be seen. I sit now in my quiet living room, sunlight spilling through the windows, the breeze smelling of salt and eucalyptus, and I feel something I haven't felt in years. Whole, because I lost everything I thought made me valuable, and still found worth. Because I was called a freeloader and became a woman who held a $5 million deed in silence. Because I was erased and rewrote myself. This is what peace looks like. And peace, I've learned, is the loudest form of power there is. It had been 3 weeks since the closing when the letter arrived. No envelope, just a crumpled sheet of lined paper folded twice and shoved through the mail slot. I recognized the handwriting, instantly slanted, loopy, dramatic. Amanda. I held it in my hands, not with anger, but with a strange curiosity, as if someone had tried to dig up a root I'd already torn from the soil. I sat by the window, steam curling from my tea, and read, "Eleanor, you got what you wanted. I hope you're proud of yourself. I hope you're enjoying your ocean view and your perfect little life while Jacob and I struggle to find a place that doesn't cost more than we can afford. You humiliated us. You destroyed our lives. For what? To teach a lesson. Congratulations, you win, but the kids miss you. They ask about you. I don't know what to tell them. Maybe that their grandma decided money was more important than family. I don't even care anymore, Amanda. I folded it once and placed it in the drawer with the others. Yes, others. It wasn't the first message. There had been 2 voicemails before. One cold one, desperate. One text from Jacob. Amanda's falling apart. She says she can't sleep. We shouldn't have treated you that way. I never replied, because replying would mean reopening a wound I'd already stitched shut with dignity. Amanda had always needed someone to blame. First it was me for being too old-fashioned, too opinionated, too visible. Now it was me again for refusing to be used. But the truth was, I didn't destroy her. She did. With every insult, every command, every day she let me sleep beside the garage while she soaked in a marble tub. Every time she said my house when I had the deed in a drawer, she never noticed. And now, she had finally been forced to look around and see what her arrogance had built nothing. Jacob, to his credit, was trying. I'd heard from his sister that he'd taken on extra shifts, enrolled the kids in public school, even started cooking dinners. Amanda, however, was drowning. I didn't gloat. But I didn't reach out either, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closure. She had made me invisible, and now she was screaming into a silence that no longer echoed. One afternoon, I walked to the beach with my journal and sat on the warm sand watching the tide pull back into itself. I wrote one sentence and underlined it twice. She will never speak to me that way again. Not because I'd finally yelled back, not because I shamed her into an apology, but because I walked away. And when you walk away with your head high and your name still your own, there's nothing left for people like Amanda to weaponize. You become untouchable. That evening, I took out the envelope and burned it in the small metal dish I kept on the balcony. The paper curled and blackened, the smoke drifting into the open air like a ghost dissolving into wind. Let her scream. Let her beg. Let her write 100 more letters. I would never answer. Not because I was cruel, but because I finally understood my worth. I wasn't a freeloader. I was a woman who had carried 3 generations on her back, and when they spat at me, I rose up, sold the roof over their heads, and left them to face the world without the crutch they never acknowledged. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. And it comes with a price. But peace. Peace is priceless.